Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Mike Reardon, Executive Director of the Catholic Schools Foundation. And first of all, as we come together, I hope that you and your families are well during these challenging days. This pandemic has been trying for the entire community, and especially for children in at-risk and lower income communities. However, with these challenges have come hope and opportunity, and that's what we're going to focus on today. Hope and opportunity. So it really is my pleasure to welcome you to this Pioneer Institute and Catholic Schools Foundation webinar discussing the new book, A Vision of Hope, Catholic Schooling in Massachusetts. Before I begin, I just want to thank the Pioneer Institute for being such a great partner to Catholic education and to school choice. They've become a true friend and ally over these years, and we're grateful to partner with them in this important work. So thank you to everyone at the Pioneer Institute. We're also pleased to be joined today by Kendra Espinoza. If you haven't heard Kendra speak before or know her story, it is truly a heroic and remarkable one. Kendra was the lead plaintiff in the landmark U.S. Supreme Court case, Espinoza v. Montana Department of Revenue. We also have Grace Carter-Regan, president of Boston College High School, and Brittany Vesley, executive director of the Colorado Catholic Conference. Please just note, during the program, the audience will be muted for this program. So if you have any questions, please submit them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we'll review them at the end of the program. The release of Vision of Hope comes as recent national news has revealed another round of disappointing figures for Catholic schools. According to the National Catholic Education Association, enrollment at the U.S. Catholic schools dropped 6.4% from the previous academic year. This is obviously in large part due to the COVID crisis and the economic downturn. And unfortunately, it's the largest single decline in the last 50 years. But here in Boston, we're beyond thankful, and we have great reason for hope for Catholic education here in Boston, but also throughout the United States. And frankly, we feel a little bit blessed here. Back in June, numbers were looking really low. We were down thousands of students, and yet it turned around with over 5,000 new students enrolling in Catholic schools. And there's many reasons for this, but not the least of which, and where we really begin and end, is with the high quality of the Catholic schools in Massachusetts, but also putting the needs of children and families first. This children first approach is due to the leadership within the schools, as well as the commitment of teachers and the steady hand of the superintendent of schools in the Archdiocese, Tom Carroll. This has also been supported by the philanthropic community, who stepped forward during this pandemic to address the pressing need of schools and families, especially those most impacted by COVID. The Catholic schools in Boston have gone to great lengths to remain open during COVID-19, but many also quickly moved to a higher quality remote learning early in the pandemic, and as needed have shifted to that. A great example of that is Boston College High School, where we have President Grace Regan joining us today. Boston Catholic Schools' efforts to ensure continued teaching and learning during this pandemic have earned them praise, not only from the governor, but nationally and even some international recognition. But most importantly, as Tom Carroll recently said in the Wall Street Journal, the science is clear, there is no substitute for in-person learning, especially for poor and minority children, most at danger of falling behind. Across the nation, the Catholic school approach is to stay open wherever we are allowed. And despite over 150 years of success in this child and family first approach and great quality outcomes, there has been a nationwide challenge, and Catholic education has faced many man-made legal and political impediments in the form of Blaine amendments. Though, as Kendra Espinoza's heroic example makes clear to us, these too can be overcome. So there were challenges, but there was great hope. The greatest legal barrier to accessing Catholic ed and other religious schools has been the 1855 Know Nothing Amendment to the Massachusetts Constitution. So this is pre-Civil War, and yet the impacts are today. Conceived in the 19th century anti-Catholic nativism, this famous amendment, or I should say infamous amendment, and another added in 1917 have blocked religiously affiliated schools from accessing public funds through private school choice programs like vouchers or education tax credits. Thankfully, with this recent Supreme Court victory in Espinoza, these Know Nothing or Blaine amendments are on the ropes nationally, and there's great opportunity present. Now, Catholic, Jewish, and religious school advocates here and in other states must mobilize to enact private school choice programs. As the Pioneer Institute book notes, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and 19 other states have established education tax programs like the one Kendra fought for to preserve for her children. And there's no reason why Massachusetts Catholic school kids shouldn't have them to. That's why we're so grateful to have researchers like Kara Kandel and Chris Sinicola, who have assembled this timely book about our successful Catholic schools, as well as to provide helpful advice for steps forward to move forward in school choice. We've long believed, I've been doing this 14 years at the foundation, and we've long believed that the Massachusetts Catholic schools are a national model. But I'm grateful to have some independent scholars using research and data make this nation-leading status even more clear to the public. To tell us more about this excellent book and how we can all continue to support Catholic schools in Massachusetts and continue to provide this opportunity for young people, I'm pleased to introduce you Kara Kandel. Kara serves as the Executive Director of Educational Opportunity, focusing on private school choice for excellent ed. She is a Senior Fellow with the Pioneer Institute. Also joining us in the program will be Kendra Espinoza. As I mentioned, she was the lead plaintiff in the landmark U.S. Supreme Court case, Espinoza v. Montana Department of Revenue. Grace Carter-Regan, President of Boston College High School, and Brittany Vesley, Executive Director of the Colorado Catholic Conference. Thank you again for joining us today, and I will turn you over to Kara Stillings-Kandel. Kara?
Thank you so much, Mike, for that introduction, and thanks everybody for spending some time with us today. My name is Kara Kandel, and I'm a Senior Fellow at Pioneer Institute. I have been for over a decade, and as was noted, I'm also the Director of Educational Opportunity at Excel in Ed, which is a national organization that focuses on many different education policies, but chief among them, educational opportunity in the form of school choice, enhancing school choice for all children. I'm really pleased and privileged, in fact, to have been able to co-edit this book with Chris Sinicola. And I want to tell you a little bit about why this book is so important right now. And a little bit of this was already touched on, but this is a book that has been in the works far long before the pandemic was upon us. And it's an important book because one of the things it does, chief among the things it does, is that it highlights Catholic schools, especially here in Massachusetts, as the important resource that they are. They're in fact a vital resource. And I'd like to start by talking a little bit about the first couple chapters of this book, which describe not only why they are a vital resource in terms of the distinctive education Catholic schools provide, in terms of the academic outcomes they afford students, but in fact that Catholic schools for so long have been an option for those who don't really have any other form of school choice. Meaning that if folks have no option other than the district school to which they are assigned, in a place like Massachusetts, we of course have charter public schools, but in a place like Boston, they are also heavily capped with many, many students on waiting lists. Catholic schools have been a place where people of all backgrounds, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all cultural backgrounds, all racial backgrounds, can access a very high quality of education and for a very low cost. And in fact, this low cost, the low cost of tuition, is one of the reasons why we've seen so many Catholic schools closing across the country. Catholic schools in Boston and elsewhere are committed to serving anybody who wants them. I should add also regardless of faith. Catholic schools serve a lot of students who are not Catholic. Parents nonetheless seek these schools out because of the faith-based education they provide, whether or not it's a faith that families share. Parents are looking for some deep-rooted, character-laden education for their children. And they also know, as the book also points out, that Catholic schools afford students very high academic outcomes. One of the things that we highlight in this book is the fact that it's documented that Catholic schools across the country tend to outperform their district school counterparts, their public school counterparts, and that is certainly the case here in Massachusetts. So when we think about comparing how students do, we look at nationally normed referenced examinations, and we know that students in the same demographic groups who are attending the public schools perform better in Catholic schools. They read and write at higher levels. They are more likely to stay in high school, to graduate from high school, and to go on from college. We also have really interesting research that's only discussed in brief in this book about what Catholic schools provide their graduates long after they have left that Catholic education. And we know that civic outcomes are better for students who have attended Catholic schools. We know that they go on to be more successful as adults, both financially and in terms of what they contribute to the society at large. This is very, very important to point out. Yet, as we've said, Catholic schools are going away. Catholic schools are going away. If we think in the immediate, as a result of the pandemic, we've seen well over 100 Catholic schools close, mainly in urban centers. And those unfortunately tend to be schools that are serving students least likely to be able to afford to attend school elsewhere. So the Catholic schools that are closing, especially at this moment, are schools that have been operating in bare bones budgets in an effort to try and serve anybody who wants not only face-to-face learning, but the very high quality of education they afford. But they were closing long before that for various reasons that we discuss in the book, including changes in the Catholic Church that have changed the model of Catholic schooling. But there's hope here. There's hope, and I'm going to get to some of the proposals that we make in the book for helping to sustain these vital resources in our communities. But there's hope in the sense, too, that Catholic schools are responding to the needs of families in a way that shows they, in fact, can adapt through these hard times. So I've already mentioned that one of the reasons parents love Catholic schools is because they do provide a distinctive brand of education. In studying this, and I have been studying Catholic schools for over 15 years of my career, one of the things I like to remind people is that Catholic schools have one thing that no other schools have, and that is that they can be very distinctly Catholic. They can be rooted in a Catholic faith, rooted in Catholic character development, and they can do that regardless of the children who come to them. It should be a very distinctive part of their mission. The Catholic schools, many have also adapted in different ways. They've said, yes, we're distinctly Catholic, but we're also going to look beyond what some perceive as this very traditional notion of Catholic schooling. People think of Catholic schools and oftentimes they think of children all in a row, or some of us might have memories of being places of where rules were followed and certain behaviors were expected. Certainly, as Tom Carroll has noted, both in his great writing and in a previous webinar, this kind of idea that in Catholic schools we follow rules has served us well during the pandemic, because children are keeping masks on, keeping 6 feet apart, and able to stay in school and healthy miraculously throughout these very troubling times when so many schools are closed. But Catholic schools are actually innovating in terms of curriculum. They're innovating in terms of what they offer students. In the book, we profile a couple of different models. We profile the Christo Rey Schools, which is a national network of schools. We have 2 right here in Massachusetts, one in the Boston area, which I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time in, although it's been a few years, looking at what they do. And this is a work-study model, so very high academics, coupled with students having jobs where they are embedded in the community, learning the skills that they're going to take with them on to college and career, and in the process, helping to pay their own tuition, because the students who attend Christo Rey Schools are students who couldn't otherwise afford to attend any sort of private school, and that's part of the model. It's a very distinctive model that's spreading across the country with great success. And we're also seeing Catholic schools getting into the voc tech space. Catholic schools realizing that there are perceptions of vocational education across this country that I think are untrue, in that they're somehow less academically rigorous, when the fact of the matter is we have great research right here in Massachusetts showing that some of our vocational technical schools are among the most competitive and most academically rigorous. And we profile some Catholic schools that are able to offer students not only that high quality Catholic education, both in terms of the faith-based education and reading, writing, and arithmetic, but also in terms of allowing children to explore vocations and get ready for college and career. So all to say that throughout this book, part of the thread is not just that our Catholic schools are academically excellent, but they're innovative and they're in fact adapting. And this is all the more reason that we need, I think, in Massachusetts to be focused with laser-like focus on how we save these Catholic schools that are doing so much for so many. I want to just take a moment to talk a little bit more about some of the contributors to this book. Many of them, if you follow research on Catholic education, and if you follow, for example, the movement to allow more students to receive Catholic education, either using privately raised dollars or through tuition tax credits or through private school choice programs. We have wonderful authors like Patrick Wolf, very distinguished scholar, probably the foremost researcher when it comes to evaluating the content and quality of private school choice programs across states. We have Jason Bedrick is a contributor, and he does an excellent chapter talking about tuition tax credits, one of the things that was already pointed out in the book. And we have a range of other authors who contribute so much to helping us understand exactly how it is that Catholic schools are distinguishing themselves in the Commonwealth. And then the final thing I'd like to say is that in this book, what we try to do is offer a way forward. And Massachusetts, I'm proud to be a Bay Stater and have been for more than 20 years, but I did not grow up here. And one of the observations that I have is we really are we do a very good job of talking about the things that we do well, and we are a very high performing state. Our public schools are comparatively high performing, but we don't like to do a good job all the time of admitting where we need to do better. We have large achievement gaps in this state, achievement gaps that, by the way, Catholic schools are closing. And we are also not innovating in terms of educational opportunity. This is something that my whole career is focused on every single day. As was already mentioned, more than 20 states have programs now that allow students to access the school of their choice, be it a faith-based school or the district school of their choice. And Massachusetts is dramatically lagging in this regard. At this moment, as I speak to you, more than 13 states have legislation on the table to consider how to enable, how to increase educational opportunity for kids, be it through a tuition tax credit scholarship, a school voucher, which we also talk about in the book, which is a reallocation of public funds instead of private funds, as a tuition tax credit scholarship would be, to allow students to attend the school of their choice. So we offer some very concrete suggestions, not only for how we can enhance educational opportunity for all families, but also for how we can contribute to boosting enrollment and allowing students access to the Catholic school education that they desire. I'm going to pass it off now to the wonderful Kendra Espinoza, who is certainly better poised than I to talk to you about what private school choice programs can do to enhance opportunity for all families and all students.
Thank you, Kara. That was very kind of you. And thank you to Pioneer Institute for the invitation to speak with all of you today. My name is Kendra Espinoza, and it was almost 6 years ago that I met with Erica Smith, an attorney with the Institute for Justice, in a coffee shop here in Kalispell, Montana, where I agreed to be the lead Montana Department of Revenue regarding the use of scholarship funds from a tax credit program for children such as mine attending religious schools. It was this past June that the U.S. Supreme Court reversed Montana's highest court and ruled that religious school options cannot be excluded for parents who use funds from scholarship programs to access private education for our children. And now begins the hard work. What will states like Montana and Massachusetts do to turn this educational opportunity into reality for their students? I can tell you that Montana is already hard at work in expanding our school choice program, and Massachusetts must follow suit to ensure options for future generations, raising the bar on education and subsequently altering the outcome for thousands of children. You see, education tax credit programs offer incentives to attract donations from private citizens to scholarship organizations, which then distribute the funds to families such as mine to help pay for tuition at a private school of our choice. And often, but not always, those schools are religious. When the Montana legislature passed their tax credit program in 2015, I was, and still am, a hardworking single mom seeking a better education for my girls, one that challenged them to a greater extent academically, one that taught them the value and importance of critical thinking, and one that more closely aligned with the Christian values that I endeavor to teach them at home. In the public school, my older daughter was ridiculed, and my younger daughter struggled academically. But both of them would later thrive at a private religious school where they've been for almost 6 years. When Montana's Supreme Court struck down the tax credit program, I was denied access to the scholarships that my daughters needed. And while I understood the implications of this for my little family, I also recognized how it would impact thousands of other families across Montana and ultimately across the United States. The Montana court based its ruling on our state's so-called Blaine Amendment, which barred public support to religious institutions. Montana is one of 37 states with similar amendments in their constitutions. Our attorneys successfully argued that tax credit scholarship programs are entirely constitutional and do not amount to the use of public funds for religious schools, as the money is granted to the parents who choose the school that best fits their needs, whether that school is religious or not. When our nation was founded, there was to be no state religion, but neither was there to be a prohibition on state or local government support for citizens exercising their religious convictions. John Adams' Massachusetts Constitution from 1780 and several other early state constitutions clearly envisioned support for a wide range of religious, private, and secular school options. But things started to change in the mid-1800s. With large numbers of immigrants coming to America in the wake of the Irish potato famine, bigotry against Catholics began to develop, and Blaine amendments began to pop up across the U.S. from flowing to the Catholic schools to which many Irish immigrants sent their children. Massachusetts' Blaine Amendment ended up being one of the nation's most restrictive. In his concurring opinion in the Espinoza versus Montana Department of Revenue case, Justice Samuel Alito recounted much of the Massachusetts legal history that was cited in an amicus brief submitted by Pioneer Institute in support of our case, for which we were very thankful. And U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in the majority opinion that, quote, "A state need not subsidize private education, but once a state decides to do so, it cannot disqualify some private schools solely because they are religious." Now, the court's ruling doesn't end this battle. It simply begins a new stage in the fight for the right of all of us parents to choose the education that is most appropriate for our children. State leaders around the country should be taking advantage of this historic decision by enacting or expanding legislation that makes religious liberty and school choice a reality for millions more families. Montana is currently in the process of expanding our scholarship program with a robust provision to increase the maximum donor contribution from $150 to $200,000, to increase scholarship values to 100% of state average per pupil expenditures, and provide options for future growth as the program reaches capacity, in addition to streamlining the processes for donors and parents. My older daughter and I just recently testified at this legislative hearing in support of House Bill 279 because we recognized that it would bring more money into the scholarship fund and offer more students the chance to grow to their fullest potential by being taught at a school that best suits their needs. Prior to the Supreme Court ruling in Espinoza versus Montana DOR, nearly 300,000 largely disadvantaged students in 18 states benefited from education tax credit programs. The overwhelming majority of those are needs-based. And more than 90% of parents with students in school choice programs say that they are satisfied with the programs. In America's choice-driven higher education system, which is world-renowned, both the federal government and the individual states support students with scholarships and loans, whether they go to Notre Dame, Yeshiva University, or a public college or university. And it's time that similar programs are enacted for private education at the primary and high school levels across our nation, ensuring that children are offered a solid foundation for excellence from an early age. New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and multiple other states already have tax credit education programs. A similar program in Massachusetts would allow many more students to attend Catholic and other private schools, which have similar demographics to the state's public schools, but have an excellent reputation for consistently outperforming them while spending far less money. But there are legalities that need to be worked through, and now is the time 1,000 during the pandemic, while the Archdiocese of Boston schools increased their enrollments by 4,400. Numbers such as this are showing to be consistent across the United States as parents are becoming more and more aware of what their children are learning and are pushing back against a failing public education system. There is strong public interest in raising up a generation of educated citizenry, and parents are willing to go to great lengths to ensure that their children are challenged and engaged in an academic arena. With the U.S. Supreme Court's landmark ruling in Espinoza, it now falls to state legislators to bring that same level of excellence and opportunity to kindergarten through 12th grade education, and I look forward to seeing robust school choice programs and options become a reality for millions more families across America for generations to come. Thank you for your time and allowing me to speak today. I would like to invite Grace to join us next with her remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks. My name is Grace Cotter-Regan, and I'm blessed to serve as the president of Boston College High School. Prior to being at BC High, I was the head of school at St. Mary's in Lynn, and it was there that I was introduced to the important work of the Pioneer Institute. I also want to acknowledge and thank Mike Reardon, who's the BC High alumnus and parent, and the Catholic Schools Foundation for their leadership and generosity, giving thousands of students access to Catholic education. And we have a buzz here. I'm in my classroom here in my office. We have an announcement. Sorry about that. I'm the product of Catholic education. Let me just turn that down. Sorry about that. The bell. Sorry about that. So I'm a product of Catholic education. My husband and sons are also the beneficiaries of a Catholic education. I attended Catholic grammar school, high school, college, and grad school. I was educated by the Sisters of Divine Providence, the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur, and the Jesuits. Each experience was grounded in faith and the charisms of the various orders, and I've integrated the spirit of the Blessed Mother, St. Julie, and St. Ignatius in my life. When I think about why Catholic education, there's something to be said for a faith tradition and tenets of the various orders or missions. What differentiates us? Well, there's a holistic approach to the development of a student. For BC High, we ask our students to commit to becoming the grad at grad, and our brand promise to our parents is that your son will become the grad at grad. And what does that mean? He'll be open to growth, intellectually competent, religious, loving, and committed to justice. We commit to Cura Personalis, which is the cure of the person, and we are aligned with over 1,000 global Jesuit schools. And the official plan for Jesuit education, often abbreviated as Ratio Studiorum, which is Latin for the plan of studies. And that document was a standardized program that globally influenced the system of Jesuit education in 1599. So we've been around for a long time. Catholic education is important, and I believe essential, especially today. To think about who will be leading this country in 20 years from now, that's something that keeps me up at night. I think it's our moral imperative to produce a diverse and inclusive group of leaders whose moral compass will impact and shape our country and our individual communities. The challenges we face as a country is a demographic decline in students, school choice with public schools and many options with charter and independent schools. For Catholic schools in our archdiocese, the financial and long-term sustainability of schools is a challenge. Access and affordability are what keeps most principals, presidents, and pastors up at night. I know that educators, particularly teachers, do not like to think about education as a business, but we are in the business of education, and sustainability is the name of the game. So to advance our mission of Catholic education, there will need to be collaboration and innovative thinking. I've always believed that the mistake we make is not creating a brain trust of leaders and business minds to map out a plan based on true data sets, and the data is available. I'm a realist, and as a leader of a Jesuit Catholic high school, the lion's share of my time is spent on enrollment, fundraising, and financial management. I'm also the director of the work, which makes me the steward of our mission. As Mike mentioned, prior to COVID, the Archdiocese of Boston's enrollment was declining. COVID and the planning of the Catholic schools inspired, as we mentioned, over 4,000 students to enroll through October 2021. To give you some context about the challenges we face, in 1942, there were 225 Catholic schools in Boston. By early last year, there were 100, and some closed during the pandemic. I often hear if we did a better job marketing our schools, we'd be in a better place. And I caution us because marketing is a tool. I believe that strategic vision and planning, along with the short and long-term forecast, is the only way that Catholic schools will survive and thrive. In the book, A Vision for Hope, offers some incredible data and insights. So I thank you, Chris and Kara, for the extraordinary work, and now I'll turn it to Brittany.
Thank you so much, Grace, and thank you to the Pioneer Institute for having me speak on this important and encouraging discussion. My name is Brittany Vesley, and I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Catholic Conference, which represents the 4 bishops in the 3 dioceses of Colorado in all areas of state and federal policy, including education. Like Massachusetts, we're also a state that has no school choice, but we are in a constant battle for education opportunity each year at our state legislature. Before joining the Catholic Conference, I was director of Catholic Education Partners, a national Catholic school choice organization. Its mission is to serve the Catholic community by advancing policy that empowers families and children to enjoy the benefits of a Catholic education. We believe that education choice will allow more families to benefit from Catholic education, allay the Catholic school funding crisis, protect the integrity and autonomy of schools and students, and serve the common good. Catholic school teaching embraces school choice. The Second Vatican Council's Declaration on Christian Education, Gravissimum Educanatus, offers the most clear teaching on parental choice in education. It says, parents who have the primary and inalienable right and duty to educate their children must enjoy true liberty in their choice of schools. Consequently, the public power, which has an obligation to protect and defend the rights of citizens, must see to it, in its concern for distributive justice, that public subsidies are paid out in such a way that parents are truly free to choose according to their conscience the schools that they want for their children. Church teaching is clear on school choice. Number one, the parent is the first educator of the child. And number two, public funding should be distributed so that parents are able to choose a school for their child that best fits their conscience. But there's a growing problem for American Catholic schooling. The Catholic community has largely failed to adequately respond to the Catholic school funding crisis, as we heard, and support policies that give parents back the right to choose the best education for their children. But despite this, Catholic education remains the largest and most successful private school institution in the country. As Mike mentioned earlier, Catholic school enrollment is on decline. In 1970, there were more than 11,000 Catholic schools educating 5 million students. Today, there are under 6,000 Catholic schools educating 1.6 million students. There are several factors for this dramatic change, but one major problem is that most parents are not aware that they have financial aid to attend non-public schools, including Catholic schools, through school choice programs available to them in their state. School choice is a stable way to increase access for more families who want to send their children to Catholic school. In 2018, the National Catholic Education Association, NCEA, and FATICA launched a nationally representative survey and found that those living in a school choice state, only 1 in 3, which is around 34%, were aware that they do in fact live in a state that had passed school choice legislation. However, of these same families, 67% said that they were more likely to consider sending their children to Catholic school if they had received subsidized tuition in the form of a school choice program. School choice is an efficient and moral way to increase accessibility and financial stability of our Catholic schools. As Kara mentioned, school choice for private education typically takes 4 forms: vouchers, tax credit scholarships, personal use tax credits, and education savings accounts. According to the National School Choice Organization, EdChoice, which is where Jason Bedrick is, today there are 67 private school choice programs operating in 29 states, including Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. Approximately 610,000 students are able to access the best education option for their learning needs through school choice programs. And in this legislative session, 23 states have already introduced new school choice legislation. This is great news for a country in the midst of a pandemic that has impacted all students and all families and all schools in the country. While I was at Catholic Education Partners, we conducted a survey of 28 programs in 20 states to find out, number one, how many school choice students are in Catholic schools, and number two, how much tuition support do these students bring to Catholic schools? We found that in 2018, Catholic schools surveyed, they received $538 million in scholarship funding. Of those schools surveyed, 65,000 students were on vouchers, and more than 72,000 were on tax credit scholarships. And of choice program students, 40% chose a Catholic school. This is important because with this data, we wanted to know whether Catholic schools were fully engaged in school choice programs. What we found was that that Catholic schools educate 35% of all private school students, and of the surveyed states, they had 37% of all choice students. So this shows that Catholic schools are performing at a stable rate, to the percentage of private school students in Catholic schools nationally. This is huge good news for Catholic schools. But regulations are still the greatest threat to school choice and likewise the relationship with Catholic schools. The three main types of school choice regulations are fiscal transparency, which is usually audits, administrative accountability, such as background checks, admissions policy, et cetera, and academic transparency, such as state testing that is mandated. It is important that Catholic schools have input on bill design to ensure that schools' mission is to protect the program and it can be easily implemented into the school. For instance, testing regulations should be broad regarding nationally norm reference testing exams so that there is no state testing mandate. Regulation is necessary, but it is best to understand that it as ordered liberty. Education choice should be designed in a way that promotes the maximum amount of autonomy for a parent and a school. Additional regulations to be aware of include legislative language that may compromise religious integrity of Catholic schools and students, including religious exemption and carve-out clauses, single SGO requirements that don't honor donor intent for your Catholic school alumni, and even more concerning on both the federal and state levels, rewrites of the Civil Rights Code that include sexual orientation, gender identity, or SOGI, as a protected class would actually compromise the religious integrity of our schools who accept state-funded scholarship students through school choice programs. The Federal Equality Act is an example of this type of non-discrimination policy that is very problematic for First Amendment rights and school choice. In addition, there are many efforts to rewrite civics education in ways that could compromise religious liberties of Catholic schools that are equally important to preserving the purpose and character of Catholic education, which is exactly what parents are looking for when they send their children to Catholic schools. School choice is not a silver bullet, but it is a great tool to allow families to choose the best education option for their child. And from our data, by and large, parents choose Catholic schooling when they're free to choose. Thank you so much for your time. Now I'd like to invite the rest of the speakers back onto the webinar.
Well, thank you all for thoughtful and very informative presentations. My name is Mary Connaughton, and I'm the Director of Finance and Administration, as well as the Director of Government Transparency at Pioneer Institute. I'm also a Catholic school mom. Now, at this point in the program, we turn to Q&A, and the first question goes to Grace. Now, Grace, as Pioneer research has shown, Massachusetts K-12 Catholic schools outperform the Commonwealth's best in the nation public school system. What are some of the key reasons why these successful Catholic schools continue to outperform the best public schools in America?
To me, it's the depth of relationships that we form with our students. Given our work is centered around God and our faith, it affords us permission to have deep relationships with students and help them to develop those relationships with the world around them. I go back to rigor, discipline, aspiration, pillars, and a faculty and staff that are expected to do more. For us at BC High, we're a Jesuit Catholic school, so we talk about the Magis and ask our faculty, staff, students, and alumni to reach for the Magis, which is the more. So there's a real expectation for our students to achieve and to go on and to join that group of 15,000 alumni and become part of a bigger community. Parents believe that their teachers should serve as moral role models. The Cara Institute at Georgetown University confirmed that strong moral values is the top reason parents choose to send their child to a Catholic school. Many of the parents who choose a Catholic school education want their child's education at school to be an extension of what they're being taught at home. They are looking for influences on their child that mirror their religious beliefs and moral choices. I also think for us schools, we need to pay attention to higher education and our competitor schools to stay relevant. And that's really, really important to think about innovation and new programs. Catholic schools offer high quality education. According to the NCEA Association, 99% of Catholic secondary school students graduate and 88% go on to college. In general, on national and standardized tests, Catholic schools consistently outperform public and other private schools by as much as 20 percentage points. So The other point I'd make is philanthropy is key to staying relevant. I know for a lot of us, we spend a lot of our time fundraising to make sure our schools are able to offer financial aid programs and innovation and tools for our students to be successful. So that's how I kind of sum up why we stay, we're outperforming, but I also think it's really faith-based.
That's wonderful. Great response, Grace. Thank you. And the next question goes to Kara. Kara, what are Massachusetts church leaders, the governor, legislative leaders, and the Catholic school parents here and in other states doing to ensure that the Espinoza precedent will be used to help establish and expand education tax credits here and elsewhere?
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, and thank you for the question, because I think I can also answer something that was just posted in the chat, I think from Representative Schmidt, in answer to this question. I'd like to start nationally and then work my way down to Massachusetts. The current moment has led many governors that we didn't think 2 years ago would be amenable to any form of school choice to wake up and say, oh my goodness, families need options. And it's because unfortunately, fortunately, but unfortunately, for the first time in memory, certainly my memory, wealthy families who have always had the luxury of moving to a different district when they didn't like their school, or accessing a private school when they weren't satisfied with the options that they had in front of them because they could pay for a private school, they, for the first time in this past year, have felt what it's like to really not have any viable options, right? So my school is closed, or it's only offering a form of learning that's not working for my child, especially I would note if I have a child with exceptional needs. And suddenly the private schools are full. I can't get in, and folks are demanding opportunities. And so state leaders are hearing this. So across the country, because parents are taking the lead, we're seeing governors say we need more public school choice, we need more private school choice. And we're seeing legislation, as I mentioned before, advanced not only to expand existing voucher programs, to expand and establish new tax credit programs, but also I'll mention, and Brittany touched a little bit upon this, education scholarship accounts, which can allow students to do a variety of things, including access private schools, but not exclusively. They can access tutoring. Who doesn't need tutoring right now? They can access, special educational services, any variety of things. And I will say that from my national view, where I sit sort of in my day-to-day, we've heard, there's certainly support in Massachusetts. So church leaders have long been supportive of the idea, very specifically, of tax credit scholarships. As was touched upon, Massachusetts has a very strong Blaine Amendment. They say that there are two, that the Espinoza case sort of only gets part of the way there, and those are Massachusetts and Michigan, the two states where I've lived in my life. But so there's certainly will. I can't speak quite as much to will from the top, but certainly on the part of school leaders, on the part of church leaders. But what I would say is most important is that this is really the work of parents. This is really the work of advocates who want to organize families. I mean, look, if we look to somebody like Kendra, who's such an inspiration, because she's a parent who said, like, no, thank you. This isn't working for my kids. And parents are really ones that get the job done. We do have, I don't have to tell folks, we've got, parents here who are agitating, and I think they're becoming increasingly vocal. They were before the pandemic in the form of the National Parents Union and other groups, and they're becoming increasingly vocal after the pandemic. I think that what I would like to say to anybody who's listening is it's really time for our state leaders and our legislators to wake up and listen to what parents need and to what they have to say, because we take parents for granted at our peril.
Great advice. That sounds wonderful. And moving on, the next question is for Kendra. And Kendra, your story is fascinating and appreciated by so many, I can't even tell you. So thank you so much. But since the landmark Scotus decision last spring, could you share what your life has been like, including your daughter's schooling, all the media attention and the interest in Montana and other states expanding or establishing education tax credits? And also for you and your daughters, what has been the best and the most difficult part of this entire Scotus case experience?
Certainly, thank you. Initially, once the ruling was handed down, there was quite a bit of media attention for a while again, as there had been through the case. People wanted to get our feedback on the outcome and how it would affect us. And so we participated in that, but it has since slowed down, for which I'm grateful. And we've been kind of able to get back to a little bit of normalcy with our life. But there have been opportunities to speak, pardon me, or write, both locally and nationally, but to a much more amicable audience. Media attention can be challenging just because of the need to understand the audience to which we're speaking and then gauge our answers accordingly. With some of the more liberal media, it was difficult, whereas with organizations that I knew were friendly to our cause, it was a lot easier to relax and speak openly. The girls have been, excuse me, busy with school and life as usual, and things look a little bit different this year because of the whole COVID situation. My youngest decided to homeschool this year just with some friends of ours who also homeschool. And my older daughter decided to continue with Stillwater. My younger one is planning to go back though to Stillwater in the fall if things continue to improve here in our state. It was a little bit difficult initially with the mandates and things, and she didn't participate in basketball this year, but she did play volleyball and she's doing really well academically. We will continue to participate wherever we can. I was just so proud of my daughter a couple weeks ago for being willing to testify at the recent hearing for the Montana House Bill 279. She did an amazing job, and I just asked her, would you be willing to testify? And she says, yes, absolutely. And she put together a speech all on her own and joined in and testified on behalf of that House Bill. Both of my girls have become really aware of how the legal processes work and the need to serve outside of ourselves just since this case and just having been a part of this case. So it's been very educational for them. They recognize that not everyone has opportunity like we have, and that's empowered them to do what they can to make a difference in our community. And even my younger daughter, just looking for more ways to become involved in the world around her, joined Civil Air Patrol this past fall and has been actively serving in our community in this capacity. And I'm so proud of her for that.
Wow, that's wonderful. What an education for them. What an experience to see all this and to be so proud of their mom too. Yeah. It's wonderful. Okay, the next question goes to Brittany. And Brittany, you've worked in several states across the country, and a strong Catholic identity in school is a central feature of the success story of Massachusetts Catholic schools. In your view, what can church leaders, national school choice advocates, and parents do to further strengthen the faith-based mission of America's Catholic schools?
Thank you so much for that question, Mary. The interesting thing with the Catholic Church is it really is diocese by diocese. So you have a fantastic superintendent in Tom Carroll in Massachusetts. I'm in Denver. Ilias Moe is also a fantastic superintendent. Awesome bishops that provide a tremendous amount of leadership. That's not the case in every state, unfortunately, and bishops do have jurisdictions over their particular diocese. But this is also where parents can stand up and start advocating. And there are organizations that are starting to crop up, like the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education, called ICLE, starting to gain more prominence nationally, which is an effort to revive the Catholic identity of our schools and the mission, which is very classical in its nature. We kind of invented classical education modeling in the Catholic Church. But post-Vatican II, we started to see a lot of our schools adopt a lot of the pedagogy that looked very similar to the public schools, which is a problem. So Catholic school reform is almost two things, right? It's the financing side, which school choice is a huge answer to, but it's also the pedagogical side and the content side, which groups like the Institute for Catholic Liberal Education is doing fantastic across the country in reforming Catholic schools. And really working closely with the bishops and superintendents to do that. So if you have interest in that, definitely reach out to your superintendent and reach out to ICLE and see if it can happen in your state too.
Thank you. All right. Kara, in your research paper and your work, you've examined lots of different kinds of Catholic schools. And there are several promising models, including Christo Ray, discussed in the book and previously mentioned in this program. What can we learn about the work study models like Christo Ray in thinking about the future of Catholic schools?
Yeah, so I think that there are the main thing that we can learn from any kind of distinctive model is that, as we always say, one size does not fit all. Different kids need different things, and certain children are going to thrive in a Christo Rey school where others will not. But the important thing to Christo Rey, I think, to get to the point that Brittany was just making about the financial side, is that nationally, it's just a very interesting way to say, hey, we have to exist, we need money. The folks who might want to come to our school and who we are very committed to serving can't pay tuition. And here's a way to do it. The other thing that I personally just love about the model is that it's students embedded in the community embedded in schools, and it's this natural give and take. So, if so much of Catholic schooling is about character development, this is a very unique take on how we develop children into adults, into contributing members of society, into people who know how. I mean, this is something I worry about with my own kids all the time. Like, are they going to know how to land, right? Whether it's when they enter college or when they enter the job market, or just in their interactions with other adults in our life. I'm increasingly worried, since we've been locked down for a year, as to these skills and where they've gone. But I think that this is the kind of thing that we can learn from the Christo Rey model. And importantly, too, that school, and not just Catholic school, I mean, this is very interesting. As I mentioned before, I think a lot of people have a very traditional notion of what Catholic school looks like in their head. And it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, it isn't that way. So we can think of innovative financial models, we can think of innovative community models in order to bring folks in. And we can also, think outside the box when it comes to school having to take place between four walls all the time, and certainly what education is.
And I can certainly relate to the comment of where they're going to land after all of this, Kara. That's a big concern for many parents. It's a challenging time for us all. All right, now the next question goes to Kendra. Kendra, you and your daughters have courageously fought in the highest court of the land to expand religious liberty in schooling. What inspired your actions, and what advice do you have for other religiously affiliated parents of all faiths about what to do to make private school choice more widely available?
Thank you. I would really like to encourage parents in any way that they can, especially at a local or a district level. As Kara said earlier, it's truly up to us parents to fight for what we know is best for our children. And as the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so our participation and active engagement in legislation or public hearings will empower leaders to act on our behalf to give our children opportunities that might not otherwise be available to them if we didn't speak up. And I would also like to tell parents to teach children to be bold in standing up for our faith and for our religious liberties, and to hold on to those rights with everything that we have, because we're watching them being stripped away at a rapid pace. And that's due largely to us as conservatives growing complacent and not fighting to maintain what our founding fathers fought for.
It's powerful. All right, Brittany, from a national perspective, in Catholic schooling and private school choice, what are the really hard truths that school choice advocates need to face to ensure that religious and private school choice expands dramatically over the next 5 years and beyond?
Thank you. That's an incredibly important question, especially with where we are as a society right now. As I mentioned at the end of my remarks, one of the things we're starting to see already crop up in some states is a lot of policies that start to impose rewrites of the Civil Rights Code that include sexual orientation, gender identity as part of the protected class and in non-discrimination policy. The problem of that is while Catholic schools are incredibly inclusive in its nature, you can't change the integrity, the religious mission and the social doctrine of the church when it comes to human sexuality, which is going to be a big piece of the fight that we see coming down. And it's already happening at state legislatures, and you're starting to see it too on the federal level. The Equality Act is a national effort to rewrite civil rights code in a similar way to Bostock v. Clayton, which is another Supreme Court case that was not as happy as Kendra's Supreme Court case with Espinoza. That was a win. Bostock was a loss. And what Bostock was a rewrite of employment laws, non-discrimination policy as it pertains to civil rights code to include sexual orientation and gender identity as part of a protected class and non-discrimination policy. And that was only for employment law, but that's not how a lot of state lawmakers are interpreting it. And it's starting to be a bigger push nationally, both on the state and federal level. And like I said, the problem is when you accept a school choice program, you're accepting state money. And a lot of Catholic schools already accept a lot of federal and state money too. So there could be an effort in very soon coming up where we're seeing Catholic schools and other religious schools that have a traditional understanding of marriage, that have a particular doctrine when it comes to human sexuality, have to choose between accepting students that are on scholarship money or not accepting them to preserve the religious integrity and autonomy of their schools. And that's a very hard truth for a lot of education choice advocates that are kind of all over the map when it comes to religious liberty issues and that pertain to school choice programs. I would like to say school choice is great because it brings in people from all types of backgrounds politically, but this is a dividing line on the political terms. And it is something that's going to be a hard truth, because especially as I mentioned, that Catholic schools do carry a lot of the weight when it comes to private school choice students too.
Well, Brittany, that's a great lead into the next question for Kara. Kara, where does Massachusetts and other states for that matter stand in securing federal funds to help support Catholic, religious, and private schools during COVID-19?
Well, so certainly, COVID has been a challenging time for all schools. And under the first federal relief pack, well, I think the second, I'm sorry, but under the CARES Act, there are so many, and there are so many more coming, Mary, that sometimes it's hard to keep straight the COVID relief. But normally, private schools, including Catholic schools, are eligible for something that we call equitable services under certainly the largest federal programs, such as Title I. Not all of them take them, and not all of them receive equitable services. And this is simply the idea that federal funds don't go directly to the schools, but that schools that serve, I'll use the Title I example, Title I students, private schools that serve Title I students are eligible to go to the district and ask for certain services to support those students. Under the CARES Federal Relief Act, there was a lot of controversy about which students in private schools should receive those funds. Then Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos thought that all private school students should be eligible because all private school students were impacted by the pandemic, just like all public school students. She did not ultimately win that battle. But what's happened in subsequent federal aid packages under the pandemic is, for example, in this latest one, what we see is a set aside that private schools, including Catholic schools, first states have to apply for that federal money, and then private schools can apply to the state for relief. What I think it's important to emphasize, and Brittany's pointed out some very, very important issues and hesitation that schools face in accepting federal money. But what we, or when I say we, I should say I, have been telling private school leaders across the country during the pandemic is we have no evidence to show right now that receipt of these federal funds, certainly under equitable services model, would lead to any undue regulation of private schools. And that's why equitable services are designed the way they are, because it's not a direct receipt of money. So as far as I understand, Massachusetts had followed the rules in terms of equitable services, and we've appointed an ombudsman that is supposed to help private schools receive what they are due. But these are complicated relationships that most times come down to the relationship between the district and the private and the surrounding private schools, more so than the federal government and the schools themselves.
Okay, so it's complicated, and we'll see. Thank you, Kara. All right, and I think we have time for one more question, a quick one for Kendra. Can you talk about why religiously affiliated schools matter so much to you and your children? And what difference Stillwater Christian School has made in your children's life?
Certainly, it's important to me. It's very important to me to give my daughters a solid foundation for which to base their future. And that means not only giving them the highest academics available that I can give them, but also giving them opportunity to be taught Christian values, the same as what I'm teaching them at home. So I want them to have that at school, to be the same as what they're learning at home. I know how vulnerable children are and how easily influenced they are at a young age. And if we as parents don't give them a solid foundation in their understanding of the Bible and their relationship with Christ now, not only will they falter as they go through life, they won't have hope and peace and a solid sense of direction. But I know that as a parent, I answer to God for how I raise my children. And I want to be able to say that I did all that I could with the resources that I was given.
Well, that is a great way to end this program. Thank you for saying that, Kendra. Wonderful end. And that's what it's all about. So with that, I want to thank all of you for participating in the program and thank everyone who is watching this program. It's really important that we get this right. And your good work will make a difference. Thanks and have a great day.
Thank you.